The screen disappears, and Thor is dumbfounded. Blacken is 10 times stronger. The ancients do not deceive me. I am such an honest person. It is said that in a certain 7-point scale, the IQ is only 2 points. Once Blacken can be so good? With a smug smile, Thor turned his head to look at Ancient One. Okay, the movie was well shot. But since you don't intend to embarrass me, why did you bring me here, just to chat with me? Ancient One shook his head, and said slowly, a long time ago, I noticed that there was something wrong with this timeline, and some openings could not be closed normally. Your mutation 12 years ago made this feeling even more obvious. For a long time, I have not been able to find the reason. Until recently, I did not understand that the key to this loophole lies in you. You are the only one who can fix the loophole. Once the problem of the timeline breaks out, the consequences are much more serious than changing the future. When the timeline of this world cannot be connected into a complete line, then the entire circuit may collapse. So, I found you and asked you to help restore time. I don't think you want to lose everything you own, do you? Thor nodded. Although I don't understand the previous technical terms, I still understand the last sentence. Okay, how can I help you? Relax and accept the power of the Eye of Agamotto. On Ancient One's chest, a dazzling green light flashed. Wait. Suddenly remembering Thor, who hadn't explained anything at home, before he could say the last sentence, he lost consciousness. Hey. Congratulations to the host for triggering the Ancient One's exclusive mission, Eternal Secret. With the help of Dormammu's dark power, Ancient One has achieved immortality. Help Ancient One. Maybe you can understand the mystery. Mission objective. Complete the repair of the time loophole. Mission reward. Active skill, immortality. Immortality. It has eternal lifespan, will not age, and can actively use it on other targets whose strength level is lower than that of the host, and bestow the power of immortality. If the target's strength is too strong, it cannot be used. As soon as he regained consciousness, Thor heard a prompt from the system. Seeing the word eternal life, I was so excited that I almost cried out. Eternal life, through the ages, the dreams of many races. Even if he is as strong as Odin and Ancient One, he can't do it, but he wants to achieve it? Unfortunately, this task is difficult to complete at first glance. Done with bug fixes? Does Ancient One Magician regard itself as an antivirus software? Just click a one-click repair? Thor was bewildered. Then, where is this? I was still in the Kamar Taj Hall just now. Why did I come to this street in the blink of an eye? Where did Ancient One lose itself? And this street looks too backward, like the old society. He took out his mobile phone and took a look. Yaosho. What the hell is this place? Asgard's high-tech mobile phone has no signal? In a nearby alley, there was a sudden sound of fighting. This place doesn't seem to be law and order. There are people fighting in broad daylight. Thor wasn't so nosy at first, but now he was in a bad mood after being tricked by Ancient One, so he was going to find someone to beat him up to vent his anger. In the alley, it was not so much a fight as a bullying of a 1.8-meter strong man against a 1.9-meter short man. The short man got up from the ground, picked up a round trash can lid to block in front of him, but was pulled off by the opponent, threw it aside, and punched him again, knocking him down to the ground. The tall man was about to step on it when he was suddenly pulled back. Looking back, a blond man was smiling at him. Stop beating. Have some quality. Don't force me to slap you. Typical fuel to the fire. If you are cowardly, where will you put your face? None of your business. He punched the door in the face, and then found that the other party was gone. While he was in a daze, there was a burst of force on his face. With a bang, the whole person was thrown into the air, and then another punch was aimed at the other cheek. Bang bang bang, the sound of fists hitting the flesh continued continuously. At the entrance of the alley, a young man in an army uniform stared dumbfounded at a 170-pound strong man who was hit by an infinite uppercut without falling to the ground. With the last punch, the strong man lay on the side like a dead dog. The thin young man on the ground got up and muttered, I almost knocked him down just now. Then he turned to look at Thor. Thank you anyway. My name is Steve Rogers. What about you? A young man from outside the alley ran in, helped Steve Rogers up, looked at his injuries, and then turned around and said, Thanks, buddy. My name is James Barnes. Usually you can just call me Bucky. Thank you for helping Steve Rogers teach the bastard a lesson. Thor was stunned. He finally understood that he was sent to 1942 by Ancient One with the power of Time Gem. This year has been a rough year for the United States. On the one hand, the German Hans offensive reached its peak, and the power of one country drove several countries to fight. On the other hand, The little devil exploded the old American's chrysanthemum at Pearl Harbor a few months ago, and the United States, which has been in the theater mode, finally couldn't sit still living. So, the loophole in the timeline happened in this period? From the looks of it, the thin man in front of him is naturally the future Captain America. This afternoon, he was once again refused to join the army. Asthma, scarlet fever, heart disease, high blood pressure. The recruiter even wondered how the poor boy survived to this day. Don't look at how bright and upright Captain America is in the movie. In fact, this guy is quite dishonest, and has tried to join the army with forged identities and times. Thinking back, at the point in time in the future, my name did not appear during World War II, so. Donald Blake, you're welcome. I hate this kind of trash who is strong but dare not go to the front line and hides in the back to do his best. Thor made a name and shook hands with them. It's not really nonsense. Seeing the scraps of paper scattered on the ground, it was the notice of rejection of Steve's enlistment. Bucky said helplessly, "Hey, although identification is not so authentic these days, it's a dangerous thing for you to keep forging your identity and trying to join the army repeatedly, and it's illegal." Steve pouted, disapprovingly. Bucky had no choice but to change the subject and said to Thor, "Dude, there's tomorrow's World Expo. Tonight, the three of us go to visit together?" Thor agreed. Anyway, the mission has no clue yet. I have to say that the relationship between Bucky and Steve is really good. While attending the expo, he also helped Steve date two girls. Although with Steve's height and straight male attributes, it is likely that there will be no drama. Thor was wandering around, thinking about his mission ideas. There is a problem with the timeline of this era, and it is likely to involve Captain America, but he thought of one thing. It is said that when Captain America returned the gem at the end, he stayed in the 40s for the last stop, completed his date with Peggy Carter, and spent a lifetime with her. Then in this world, there will be a hidden old Captain America. But if he prevents the flickering incident, then Captain America will have no chance to travel through time and space, which will form a conflict. The purpose of meeting Peggy Carter was to verify the existence of the old Captain America. Maybe this is a time loophole. Drip, congratulations to the host for discovering the branch of the mission, the eternal secret. Complete the mission after completing all the branches. Branch 1. Block the future passage of Captain America from the route, and maintain the timeline where the host is located. Branch 2. Not unlocked, please explore by yourself. Branch 3. Not unlocked, please explore by yourself. Blocking Captain America from crossing. So, in the timeline I'm in, the old Captain America doesn't exist. Since we want to block it from the route, we have to start with the motivation that Captain America traversed. Peggy Carter. Thor looked at Steve and Bucky not far away, and smiled. Captain America, women are big pigs, Winter Soldier is your thing. I am doing this for your own good. The smile gradually changed, and an idea gradually took shape. In another parallel world, the story of Captain America has no heroine, and the only CP is Bucky. It is said that at one point, Captain America asked Bucky to help keep the ring, and Bucky put it on. Another time, Bucky was injured, but Captain America didn't hold him up like in the movie, but with a princess hug. It is said that there was a selection in the previous life, where Marvel's favorite pair of CPs were selected regardless of gender, and Dun Dong ranked first. All in all, a good friend and a quilt. Ah bah, it's a lifetime. Dun Dong is an iron friend, and Peggy Carter is like a mistress. This morning, the doctor who was examining Steve was suddenly called out at some conscription office, leaving Steve alone. Glancing at the falsification of military volunteer form, written on the wall, Steve panicked. In the past, every time the inspection was completed, it was directly rejected, and I never felt sorry for him. In fact, the conscription office didn't bother to take care of such a trivial matter. Is it going to be over today? This kind of thing can be big or small, if you were locked up for 10 or 8 years. Especially when a serious-looking soldier drew the curtain and walked in, Steve felt that he was already cold. At this time, an old man from the Mediterranean came in, motioned for the soldiers to go out, and then had a straightforward conversation, and Steve's answer satisfied him. The old man finally said, "Let me introduce myself, I am Dr. Abraham Erskine, and I can give you a chance. I just need one chance." At this time, a voice sounded outside. "Is the doctor there? I'll sign up." Dr. Abraham nodded to the soldiers, and a blond young man was brought in. "Mr. Black, you joined the army too?" Steve greeted. "Hey, I've passed." The result of the examination was naturally passed, and the almost perfect physical measurement data made Dr. Abraham decide to include him in that team. If the character passes the test, it may be the second candidate for the super soldier serum. The young man who came in was definitely Thor. Since you're going to help Bucky watch Captain America, try to join him on the same team as possible. He watched the conscription office where Captain America entered early in the morning, and after seeing Dr. Abraham enter, he waited for a few minutes before following him in. The physique of the Asgard people is far superior to that of mortals, not to mention Thor is a royal family, that is the body of the god who once fought Thanos head-on. Even the strengthened Captain America is no match for him. In order not to cause a sensation, he has suppressed his physical condition as much as possible. If it weren't for worrying about attracting the attention of this era itself and causing unnecessary variables, the power of thunder alone would be enough to destroy any army. Soon, Thor and Steve appeared in the barracks wearing brown military uniforms. Thor and Steve sit next to each other. Steve may still think it's nice to have a good friend standing beside him, but he doesn't mind standing next to Thor, who is 1.9 meters tall. His thin body is more conspicuous. A heroic female officer walked in front of them with graceful steps. The curly hair matched with the flame-like lipstick adds a bit of charm. A rude soldier flirted with her, and was instantly beaten by her. The other muttered a few words desperately, and then lay down in less than 3 seconds. The recruits fell silent for a moment. What the hell? This woman is so fierce. Except Steve and Thor. The former was still in a daze stupidly, while the latter looked at her with great interest. Future legendary agent, Peggy Carter. Peggy Carter glanced, and immediately discovered the cutest height difference between Thor and Steve. Seeing Peggy's gaze turn, Thor gave her his trademark smirk and winked at her. This beautiful lady, I wonder if I am lucky enough to invite you to have a glass of red wine with me tonight? Seeing this scene, Steve felt as if something was moving away from him, but he didn't know what it was. He frowned, but recovered quickly. Well, what are you thinking so much about? With that time, why not think more about Bucky? He should already be on the battlefield, right? Hey. Congratulations to the host for completing the task, Eternal Secret, Branch 1. Blocking the future Captain America from the source, and maintaining the timeline where the host is located. In that instant, possible future developments for Captain America and Paige had been cut off. The task is very simple to complete, but the follow-up is very troublesome. Peggy Carter had a smile in her eyes. Good idea. Wait for me here after training tonight. I think this will be an unforgettable night. Although the voice was very gentle, even honest Steve shuddered, and the other recruits were already mourning for Thor. Is it too late for me to refuse now? Just trying to get some attention, so Steve and Carter don't see eye to eye. This is a character at the level of an old lady, really not my style. Thor subconsciously ignored that he was also at the ancestor level. Okay, boys, let's talk about the date in the evening. A middle-aged officer exuding a fierce temperament came up and joked. Colonel Phillips. Peggy was the first to salute, also reminding the recruits. Glancing at the recruits, Phillips began his speech. General Barton once said that war is fought with arms, but victory depends on soldiers. We win wars because we have the best. Soldiers? He glanced at Steve. What the hell? How did something strange get mixed in? Phillips felt bad for a moment, and he glanced at the expressionless Dr. Abraham. Bad old man, very bad. He tried hard to control the corners of his twitching mouth, and continued his opening remarks. The Institute of Strategic Science is an organization that brings together the best scientists and talents from allied countries in the entire free world. Our goal is to create the most powerful legion. The legion is composed of soldiers. So this selection is the selection and training conducted by this institute to train super soldiers. After a simple speech, it is training. Without any surprise, Steve won the first place in each project, the last one, although he worked very hard. On the contrary, Thor is far ahead in almost every item, almost reaching the highest record in the barracks. Phillips even suspects the guy's Superman in his underwear. After inquiring, it turned out that both of them were stuffed in by Dr. Abraham. Bad old man, slipping away. On the training ground a few days later, the recruits are training. How about the people I brought? Dr. Abraham asked Phillips. Well, Phillips nodded in satisfaction. Brave, strong, flexible, and able to adapt to all kinds of high-intensity training. If you decide to choose him, I have no objection. Peggy Carter interjected. I have reservations. This guy has all the characteristics of a soldier. You should pay attention to how many times he has fought in the past few days. Oh, Miss Carter, you can't have a bad impression of him just because he dove you that night. After all, everyone knows that you kept him to deal with him. As for fighting, every Hodge took the initiative to provoke once. Then, seeing Dr. Abraham's strange expression, he suddenly confirmed in a low voice. Doctor, are you talking about that black? No, I'm talking about Steve. Phillips slapped his head. Damn it, don't tell me you're looking for an experimental mouse. Even Hodge is much better than him. I even think of him as Black's addition. The doctor shrugged and said, Blake is indeed very good. In fact, if there is no Steve, I will choose him. The reason why I choose Steve is that I value qualities other than physical fitness. As for Hodge, I think his character needs to be tested. I've seen him bully Steve many times. He pointed at the crowd, and Hodge was picking on Steve, before getting knocked down by Thor. Damn it, we're going to fight again. Peggy Carter cursed and stepped up to stop it. Colonel Phillips said lightly, war has never been based on convincing people with virtue, but on courage. As he spoke, he took a grenade from the item box, pulled out the insurance, and threw it into the group of recruits. Grenade. Shit. The soldiers were shocked and fled in all directions. Among them, the strong Hodge took the lead and quickly rolled to the back of a jeep. Little did he know that he had lost an opportunity forever. Among the crowd, only 3 people did not escape. One is Steve. He rushed against the flow of people and threw himself on the grenade, with fear on his face, but he still held the grenade tightly and shouted, Go away, go away. The other 2. Peggy wanted to rush up and kick the grenade into the nearby open space, but before taking 2 steps, Thor rushed up to her with open arms, threw her down, and shouted, Grenade. Lie down. The grenade did not explode for a long time, and everyone finally reacted slowly. At this time, Phillips shouted, It's an imitation. Line up, get back. Steve said coldly, Is this a test? The doctor smiled triumphantly, and Phillips was finally convinced. This thin soldier has some of the most valuable and rarest qualities as a soldier sacrifice. With a bit of embarrassment on his face, he said stiffly, He's still too thin. Then he turned his head to look at Thor and Peggy, who were still in a daze, and said with black lines on his face, Does this kid really think of himself as a Superman? It's so close, it's useless to lie down. The doctor shrugged. Probably yes, it's written like this in comics. But at least, if it's a real grenade, Peggy can survive under the pressure. Therefore, I choose him as the second candidate. The soldiers obviously noticed this scene, and all of them blew their whistles to death. Peggy Carter's face turned red and pale, but unexpectedly she didn't get angry, but pushed her lightly, and said in a low voice, You, get up first. Thornton felt a pain in his egg. Just now, he saw Peggy Carter running towards the grenade against the flow of people, and he had a subconscious conditioned reflex. Deadman wow. If Steve's behavior in the original book is a small stone that can cause ripples in Peggy Carter's heart, then Thor threw in a boulder this time and set off waves, and the ripples are even more irrelevant up. Steve's performance completely silenced those who originally had objections. Why did you choose me? He asked Dr. Abraham that in his dorm room the night before the Super Soldier Project. Because, rather than being a good soldier, I want you to be a good man. Actually, Steve had some hesitation. Black might be a better choice. Although he knew that this might be his only chance, he still brought it up. The doctor was taken aback for a moment, and then became more satisfied. He smiled and said, Yes, Black is indeed the best soldier I have ever seen. He is brave and firm, defying the strong and sympathizing with the weak. However, compared to you, he is too irritable and aggressive. Provocative, but his excitement when he fights cannot be hidden. The doctor joked. He gives me the same feeling as a Spartan. Definitely, as a soldier, these are not disadvantages but advantages. However, super soldier serum will infinitely magnify a person's personality characteristics. And you, humility, integrity, compassion, sacrifice. The qualities you possess are what I need most. Sounds like a knight selection. Do I have to swear an oath tomorrow? Steve laughed too. Because of Thor's disruption, Steve took Dr. Abraham's car to the experimental base the next day, while Thor sat in Peggy Carter's passenger seat. As Colonel Phillips' favorite soldier, Abraham agrees to select Steve as the second super soldier after his successful trial. Therefore, Thor is eligible to visit in advance. In fact, Thor knows that with his own strength, the super soldier serum has basically no effect on him. Also, Captain America will only have one. How do you feel? Are you disappointed not to be the first super soldier? Peggy broke the weird atmosphere. Since the embarrassing incident on the training ground, she ordered everyone not to speak out, and never let it be mentioned. But facing Thor, it was still a little embarrassing. That's not true. It's Steve who participated in front of me. If it's him, I have no problem. Besides, don't you think I'm very good even without strengthening? Peggy Carter nodded incredulously. Fighting twice in 3 days in the barracks is not for everyone, and it's still a group of fights. Tell me about your past. What did you do before? I don't believe that such a good skill would be an ordinary doctor. Thor's fake identity is a doctor in a small clinic, and it can be found out that it is fake. It's just that in this age, most people choose to turn a blind eye. Did you see it? I used to be a hunter in Alaska, and I hunted brown bears twice in 3 days. Peggy Carter rolled her eyes. In the laboratory, Thor looked at Steve, who was about to step onto the laboratory bench, and joked, "How is it? Are you nervous?" Steve nodded. "It's a bit, but it's my job," he said, took off his shirt under the doctor's instruction, and lay down on the laboratory table. Seeing Steve's rib bone figure, Thor couldn't help but secretly took a few photos, waiting to show him as Black history in the future. Numerous needles plunged into Steve's body, injecting the drug into the muscles, and the bench slowly closed. Howard Stark, who was in charge of mechanical equipment, turned on the power. 10%, 20% to 30%. The experimenter read out the data on the meter. The light inside the test bench became more and more dazzling, and outsiders could no longer see Steve inside. Only Thor hasn't seen it yet, and Steve is clenching his teeth to keep himself from grunting. 40% to 50%. An experimenter next to him added. The discipline of heart rate increased, but the vital signs were basically stable. This has surpassed all previous experimenters. Thor glanced at the government personnel next to Howard Stark. This guy's eyes were cloudy. If he guessed right, this guy is actually Hydra. It's just that all the attention is on Steve, and no one is paying attention to him. Howard thought Thor was looking at him, so he explained. It is said that the pain of 30% dose is similar to that of childbirth, and the pain of 40% dose is equivalent to broken eggs. Everyone has black lines on their faces. How the hell do you know so clearly? Have you ever had a baby? No. Have you been kicked? Thornton couldn't help laughing. As expected of Tony Stark's father, he looked gentle, but he was actually a slut. It's a pity that he was assassinated early. At this time, the sound of the system suddenly jumped out. Drip. Congratulations to the host for discovering the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 2. Complete all the branches to complete the mission. Branch 1. Completed. Sideline 2. Save Howard Stark from dying at the hands of the Winter Soldier in the future. Branch 3. Not unlocked, please explore by yourself. Before he had time to think about it, the dose over there reached 60%, and Steve finally couldn't help but let out a scream. Ah. Howard stopped increasing the dose, and Dr. Abraham asked eagerly, "Steve, how? If it doesn't work, I will stop immediately." If this noble young man fell on the laboratory table, he would never forgive himself. "Don't stop. I can stand it," Steve yelled through gritted teeth. 70%, 80% to 90%. The screams became louder and louder, as if they would collapse in the next moment. Howard stopped and looked at the doctor. The doctor asked anxiously, "Steve, how is it? Is it okay?" But apart from the screams, he couldn't hear other sounds. The doctor ordered helplessly, "Stop. Wait." Thor interrupted him loudly, "He can, go on." He could see what was going on inside, and Steve still demanded to continue, but he couldn't speak anymore. So he stops the doctor from interrupting, and even uses the bonus skill from the original Loki mission. Master of Lies. When you make a statement, it is easier for the other party to believe it. To ensure success, he even threw in some black magic. This is what he learned from Frigga. Although he is not as proficient as Loki, it is enough for mortals. In the eyes of everyone, Howard increased the dose for the last time. 100%. The experimental cabin slowly opened, and a robust figure appeared in front of everyone amidst the smog. Steve, who stepped off the laboratory bench, can be said to have become another person except for his head. He was originally 1.6 meters tall, but he was almost a foot taller. And the muscles that explode all over the body are simply a mini version of Hulk. "How do you feel?" Thor asked. "It feels great, now I can play against anyone all day." There was warm applause from the audience. People came up, and no one noticed except Dr. Abraham. The Hydra spy pulled out a lighter. Abraham was startled, but before he could react, there was a bang explosion, and the laboratory was in chaos. Before everyone had time to react, the Hydra spy grabbed the remaining tube of serum, shot Dr. Abraham and ran away. Thor pulled him past him, out of the way, and fell to the ground. Steve ran up quickly, and the doctor shouted, "I'm fine, go after me." Steve rushed out quickly. The spy just got into a car, and before he could close the door, he was grabbed and dragged out by Steve, so scared that he ran away and took off his coat in an instant. Originally, with Captain America's physical fitness, he could be easily caught, but on the one hand, the newly remodeled Captain America could not adapt to his own strength, and on the other hand, he had to worry about the safety of the public, so the two chased and fled all the way. On the pier, a child was held hostage, and he jumped off the pier and got into the prepared submarine. Just when he thought he had completed the task, a pair of arms stronger than his thighs shattered the window with a bang, grabbed him out, threw him onto the pier, and quickly jumped out to hold him down. Seeing that he couldn't escape, the spy smashed the serum into pieces and shouted, "Chop off one head, and grow two more, Hydra hail." Immediately, he tilted his head and died. The surrounding melon eaters cheered excitedly. In this era, a hero is needed too much. The next day, Captain America's heroic deeds were published by major media. And another bad news came. Dr. Abraham temporarily forgot the formula of the serum due to injury and excessive shock. Phillips is annoyed that he wants an invincible army, not just one man, even though Captain America has shown his strength. After the hard-working Captain America had no choice but to have his blood sampled, he began to participate in various catwalk events and was regarded as a mascot. And the best black recruit, Thor, was soon sent to the front. It was a pity for Phillips. If he had been chosen in the first place, he might be able to protect the doctor immediately after undergoing the transformation, or recover the potion. No one doubts Thor, because many people know that he is the default second super soldier. Once the plan is terminated, he will lose the most. "Oh, I'm sorry, Doctor," Thor murmured to himself the night before heading to the front. For him, the effect of the super soldier serum is almost non-existent, but the side effects are not small, so there is no need for him to take risks to change history. Saving Dr. Abraham is already the limit. The doctor's amnesia is naturally due to Thor's black magic. During the 5 years in Asgard, in addition to eating fat, he read a lot of classics and learned a few simple magic. He wouldn't let the super soldier project go ahead, even if he didn't care about the plot. The character of Dr. Abraham and Steve is unquestionable, but not everyone is so noble. Once the military masters the means to mass-produce super soldiers, it will be a disaster for the world. After all, after the mustache hit the street, in a few years, Lao Mei will start another unjust war. The super soldier plan of this era should be terminated. Oh, how boring. Somewhere in a barracks on the Italian front, Thor sighed. It has been several months since I came here. The two sides are evenly matched, and the war has fallen into anxiety. This is also because Thor deliberately dawdled. If he was a little more serious, this would already be hitting Berlin. He's not in the mood to put in too much effort and be a Yankee war hero. Definitely, if Thor is arranged to go to the Pacific battlefield, he will definitely not mind letting the other party see the wrath of the gods. But when he thought of the poor Captain America still being his internet celebrity, he couldn't help laughing out loud. "What are you laughing at? Whose head did you steal?" Peggy Carter came to him and sat down. "Why are you here?" Thor's face hurts. Recently, many other soldiers have complained to the officer. Black is a shameless old thief who specializes in head grabbing. He often explodes the opponent's head as soon as he aims at the target. In private, giving Thor the nickname, the head dog. Thor didn't take it seriously, and if he took the head with his ability, he didn't take the white or the white. Two soldiers walked past talking and laughing, and one of them said, "Have you heard that the circus troupe is coming to our barracks to perform?" "Never mind him, it's better to drive a dozen girls." Thornton suddenly became excited and said excitedly, "Steve is here. Come on, let's cheer him on." Peggy couldn't help but patted him, and smiled lightly. "Is there anyone like you as a friend? You are so gloating." In this era, entertainers and actors are far less popular than later generations. In the eyes of more people, guns are the romance of men. On the stage, Steve's performance did not have the expected effect. These soldiers who have experienced war are not so easy to fool. Only Thor waved his fist in the audience and shouted, "Good, good. How do I feel like I'm a street performer?" Steve's face darkened. Peggy Carter couldn't help covering Thor's mouth. "It's too embarrassing." Everyone in the audience didn't buy it, and booed one after another. "Let's go, we want to see the girl." Eggs and fruits were thrown towards the stage, and Steve hurriedly raised his shield to block them. Unexpectedly, the first time I raised the shield, it was actually facing the friendly army. "Sweetheart, sign me up." The guy who spoke pulled down his pants and turned towards Steve. Steve frowned and stepped aside, replaced by a team of cheerleaders, and the atmosphere became lively. "Hey, big star, you are doing well. I heard that you are a household name in China," Thor joked. Steve gave a wry smile. "I can only improvise. After all, my previous audiences were kids. Brace yourself. You are America's new hope. Yeah. Every time I go to a state, the bond sales increase by 10%. It's okay, at least I have something to do. Colonel Phillips even wants me to stay in the laboratory. Then do you only have these two options? The laboratory and the stage? Thor looked serious. You can do far more than that. Steve said helplessly. I've always dreamed of going abroad and serving the country on the front line. Now I'm finally here, but in this way. You need a chance to break the rules. Members don't think so. If you really obeyed the rules, you wouldn't sign up to join the army again and again. After a pause, Thor said in a deep voice, now it's time for you to be unruly. I heard the news today that the 171st Division is in Ozano and Schmidt's men had a fight, 200 people went, less than half came back. Of those who came back, I didn't see Bucky. What? Like a bolt from the blue, Steve stood up on the spot and ran towards Phillips' barracks despite the heavy rain. This is the opportunity you said? Peggy Carter asked, who had been silent. Yes. Superhero shouldn't be on stage, he needs an opportunity to prove himself. What about the captives? Is there a rescue plan? Steve asked excitedly at Phillips' desk. Phillips sighed, and said in a deep voice, yes, that is to win this war. Where are the captives kept? Captain America was in a hurry. When the war was over, Bucky's ashes would be cold. 30 miles behind the enemy, we have to go through heavy defenses. After a pause, he said in a low voice, this is not your business. You have a performance in half an hour, go prepare. Leave alone. Okay, I understand. Captain America looked determined, and he knew that it was time for him to break the rules. Inside the tent, Steve and Thor are packing their gear. Actually, you don't have to come with us, Steve said. In fact, he also knew that the colonel was organizing manpower to try to rescue, and it was very risky to go to the enemy's rear to sneak in. No, you don't want to be a mascot, and I'm tired of eating and waiting to die, so let's play a big game together. But it's okay, you are the one who disobeys orders, and I am coerced. He made a joke, looked at Carter at the door and said, Ms. Peggy, contact Stark for help. I heard that he is here. We need a flight crew. We can't let us run behind the enemy's rear, can we? Carter said with a dark face. I always feel that I was dragged into a thief ship by you. Stark is the best civilian flight officer, he is the only one who dares to send us here in this kind of horrible weather. On a transport plane, Peggy Carter explained to the two. This is crazy. I feel like all four of us are going to be court-martialed if we make it back alive, Stark complained, and he was definitely joking, to brighten up the atmosphere. It doesn't matter. Thor changed the topic indifferently, say, Mr. Stark, when do you plan to have a son? Your career must be inherited by someone. Oh, if possible, I'd rather have a daughter. At least the chance of becoming like me is lower. Steve asked. Any problems like yours? I've always put my personal preferences ahead of the collective good, Howard added. And, son, there's a good chance he'll be a playboy like me. Don't think too much, you will definitely have a son, and he will be a more powerful playboy than you. Thor smiled wickedly. Peggy Carter was about to ask why, when the sound of guns and guns sounded in her ears. We can't go any further, let's parachute ahead. Thor arranged the plan. After you go down, immediately sneak in to save people. I'm outside, trying to attract the attention of the enemy. Captain America naturally agrees, although it is more dangerous to sneak in, but he has nothing to fear, and he jumps first. Blake. Thor was about to jump off with a big package when Peggy Carter called him, come back alive. Don't worry, I will. Jumping down, tearing open the package in midair, there are 2 remodeled Gatlings. Damn it. What is he trying to do? Peggy Carter looked back at Howard, he must be responsible for these 2 Gatlings. Howard shook his head, it's not me. She suddenly understood what Thor meant by attracting the enemy's attention, and immediately became anxious, and immediately shouted, quick, give me a parachute, quick. No, Mr. Black told me that you must not let you go down and drag him down. At the gate of the Hydra camp, Steve looked at Thor with a machine gun on the left and right and dumbfounded. Damn it, where did you find this thing? Captain, don't swear. Thor said lightly. Remember what I said. I will attract the attention of the enemy for you, and you are responsible for sneaking in. Just as Steve was about to speak, Thor ran to the back of a bunker with a gun in hand, grabbed the loudspeaker and yelled, the 9-headed worm inside is coming out and dying. Gatling fires like crazy. Steve's face was covered in black lines. As expected, the Hydra soldiers were alarmed. It's hard not to be alarmed, with such a short distance and Gatling's rate of fire, Hydra almost thought that the Allied forces had already attacked. What's more, it was accompanied by greetings from the women of the other party's family. Steve's eyes were moist immediately. In his opinion, Black was dead. He was using his life to fight for the chance to save others. This guy is a noble person who is more qualified to receive super soldier serum than himself. Blake's sacrifice must not be in vain. Taking advantage of the guard's attention on Thor's side, Steve sneaked in quietly. With Thor pulling hatred, Steve, who originally had basically zero infiltration ability, sneaked in easily by relying on the skills of a Superman. As soon as Steve left, Thor let himself go. With his strength, wouldn't it be easy to abuse a group of mortals? Dual-wielding Gatling kept firing. Hydra was stunned. Obviously, many of them used energy guns made through Tesseract, but they were still at a disadvantage. Is this man a devil? Obviously carrying 2 Gatlings weighing several hundred kilograms, he ran faster than normal people, and rolled even more smoothly. A lot of people were hiding behind the bunker, and they were blown up as soon as they showed their heads. I have seen accurate marksmanship, but they are all sniper rifles. I have never seen heavy machine guns, especially Gatling, which can be really accurate. This thing is not purely used to rely on fast fire rate and is the clip large so that the firepower is suppressed. If Thor knew what they were thinking, he would have sneered, really thinking that I threw the hammer for nothing all these years? Not to mention such a short distance, even if it is 800 miles away, you can still smash your dog's head with a hammer. Not to mention you scumbags, even Thanos can't do it. Say cut off your chest, never cut off your head. Originally, Thor grabbed an energy gun for fun, but found that although this thing is similar to a laser gun, but without the Tesseract charging, this thing can only be used as a fire stick after firing bullets. On the other hand, because most of the guards are going to fight Thor, there are a lot fewer people on Captain America, especially Thor told him some tips. Where did it come from? The guard guarding the prisoners stared at this strange guy, with one hand on the gun. Actually, Captain America could have brought him down with one blow, but glanced at the cell and didn't see Bucky. He said in a deep voice, "The head of state has already guessed that someone is coming to rescue the prisoners, so he asked me to convey the order to pull all these prisoners out and shoot them." The guard looked suspicious, when Steve leaned into his ear and whispered softly, "Hydra hail." The Hydra guard suddenly realized, and immediately took out the key to open the cell. Steve took a look and cursed, "Why are there only so many people? Idiots, don't tell me you let them go." A group of people were taken to the quarantine area over there for experiments. "No, he is a spy." The guard was stunned by the scolding, and subconsciously replied, and instantly realized that he was being cliched. How could the insiders of Hydra don't know about the experiment? He immediately drew his gun, but Steve, who moved faster, broke his neck. "Hi. I'm Captain America. I'm here to save you, everyone run." After explaining, he hurried towards Bucky. The captives reacted quickly found the weapons that had been confiscated before, and killed them all. Along the way, they found that there were not many guards in the huge base. When they rushed out of the gate, they found that Thor had already snatched a tank and was galloping in the camp. No wonder they heard the artillery fire outside. When Captain America led Bucky and ran out of the camp, the Hydra soldiers were almost kneeling. Seeing Thor's head poking out from the top of a battered tank, Steve couldn't help but burst into tears. "Hi. Good brother, I'm so glad you're still alive." He couldn't help but punch Thor in the chest lightly. "Hey, I don't die that easily. I'm still waiting for the Howard family's son to call me uncle." Captain America was speechless. Why does this guy care so much about Howard's son? How did he know that Howard would definitely have a son? In the early morning, in the U.S. military barracks, Colonel Phillips sent a telegram to the hospital. The captain was missing in the third area behind enemy lines, and the search and rescue team found no results. Therefore, I can only declare that Captain Rogers was killed in action. After saying all this in person, the colonel couldn't hide his sad expression. This is, Carter brings news. The last reconnaissance plane has returned, and no signs of life have been detected. The colonel was very disappointed with Carter's self-assertion. He said in a deep voice, "We can't do anything to Stark. He is rich and the biggest weapon supplier, but you are nothing." Carter was expressionless. "With all due respect, sir. I don't regret everything I've done, and I'm sure they won't either." The colonel was furious. "I gave you a chance, Agent Carter. But now the big stars in the United States are dead, and many young people are dead, including the young man I am most optimistic about, because you like him." Carter argued. "That's not the case, I'm confident." "Then wait until this department is closed to see if you still have confidence." At this moment, There was a loud noise outside, and the two ran out. At the gate of the camp, Captain America and Bucky walked up side by side. Behind them was a tank, followed by thousands of captured soldiers. With weapons in their hands, many of them were injured, even missing arms and legs, and needed the support of their comrades to walk. It was obvious that this group had been through a tough fight not too long ago. In fact, they did not simply escape from the prisoner of war camp, but attacked from behind the German army and forcibly dug through the defense line and came back. "Look, who's back? Captain America." The crowd started to applaud. Peggy Carter scanned the crowd anxiously, and when she saw Thor coming out of the tank, she was relieved. Steve and Thor walked up to Colonel Phillips, saluted, and Steve spoke. "The wounded need treatment. We are willing to accept punishment." "No, it's you, not us." Phillips smiled softly. "That's not necessary." Turning around and walking away, walked to Peggy's side and listened for a while, and said softly, "I really need confidence, your vision is right." Peggy Carter walked up to Thor and said with a smile, "You're late." "It's okay. The colonel said that there will be no punishment today," the straight man replied. Peggy Carter suddenly felt angry. "Cheer for Captain America." Bucky shouted loudly on the side, and everyone responded one after another, cheering one after another. "Hey, Bucky, I have a share in saving people, don't be partial." Thor went up to make trouble. Go. You said it yourself. Steve dragged you there forcibly. Why do you go back on your word? Besides, you usually get a lot of limelight, let's let it go this time." Bucky's protective expression made Thor couldn't help but look at Peggy Carter, who was not far away looking at him. Captain America, women are tigers, and Winter Soldier is your thing." Going deep into the enemy's rear and rescuing a large number of prisoners, Steve and Thor became heroes in the eyes of many people, and both received the Medal of Courage from the President. No one will ever get Captain America back on stage to perform, and Colonel Phillips will never let him go. While rescuing Bucky, Steve glanced at the map and basically noted Hydra's weapon stronghold. "I have prepared the best fighters for you as teammates," Colonel Phillips said. "Excuse me, I also have candidates," Captain America solemnly said. Cheers. At the wine table, Thor assembled an elite team from the rescued captives. "Roar Commando. It's okay to fight together, but you have to do one thing." "What's up? Have a drink with us." When Peggy Carter walked in a red dress, everyone in the hall was down except for Thor, except that his physical fitness was being strengthened, and Steve, who was drinking far more than ordinary people, was still shaking. "Can't you let me save some time?" Peggy Carter said angrily. "Don't blame me, it's these guys who insist on challenging." Thor looked innocent. He is a big guy who can drink 400 caddies of beer. How dare a group of mortals compare their drinking capacity? Even Natalia, the most drinkable hairy sister in the future Avengers, can't resist a few rounds. Originally, Steve didn't want to make trouble with him, he is a good young man who doesn't drink, but Bucky insisted on coaxing him together. "Okay, Howard has prepared some new equipment for you, go and have a look tomorrow." Peggy finished speaking, staring at Thor. "Miss Page looked at me like that, could it be that she wanted to dance with me?" Thor joked. "I don't have the time now, wait until the war is over." "Well, when the war is over, we'll go dancing." As the Prince of Asgard, he is not comparable to a mortal like Captain America. What is a mere flag? Stand up and stand up. Early the next morning, Thor and Steve arrived at Howard's office. Perhaps it was fate. Steve ignored those high-tech shields carefully crafted by Howard, and took a fancy to a simple and violent buckler at a glance. Thor is equipped with various high-tech firearms, almost reaching unlimited ammunition. After seeing Thor's ability to use Gatling as an AWM, everyone agreed that this is the best sharpshooter in history. Although this guy's fighting ability is also abnormal. Originally, Thor asked Howard to create a vibranium hammer that imitated the shape of Mjolnir. Unfortunately, the shape of holding a gun in one hand and a hammer in the other was too unorthodox. Under Peggy Carter's strong opposition, he had to give up. But Steve, after picking up the hammer and trying it out, found that it was in his hand by accident. He fell in love with this hammer on the spot, second only to Shield. With a shield in one hand and a hammer in the other hand, in addition to not being able to discharge, the legendary hammer team who can fight Thanos 50-50 will play early. "Mr. Stark, thank you for giving me this equipment, I have a gift for you," Thor said mysteriously. "Oh? If you say that there is a beautiful girl to introduce to me, I might look forward to it more." These days, even Steve, a straight steel man, can see that Peggy Carter treats Thor unusually, let alone the old man. Howard is a slut, with a sour tone. Thor smiled and patted him on the shoulder, and gave him a hug. Asgardian friendship in the future world, this gift is precious enough. Howard rolled his eyes. Although he had known this guy's shamelessness for a long time, he was still shocked by his shamelessness. In fact, it was a precious gift. During the first hug, Thor slipped an agent-specific handy syringe into his back. The potion inside is exactly the improved version of Extremis brought from the future. It slightly improves strength and physical fitness, but greatly improves the function of recovery and regeneration. The value of this gift will not be reflected until half a century later. Drip. Congratulations to the host for completing the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 2. Save Howard Stark, and prevent him from dying in the hands of the Winter Soldier in the future. Another branch is completed, and the last one has not yet been triggered. Thor guessed that the last mission might have something to do with the Red Skull. In the days that followed, the Howling Commando was committed to attacking Hydra's various factories in Europe. They were invincible and unstoppable, and Hydra strongholds were taken down one by one. Captain America with the hammer and shield in his hand, even Thanos dared to take out a group of Hydra miscellaneous soldiers. Definitely beat them in a fancy way, and staged a scene of tearing devils with his hands and dismantling tanks with his bare hands every 3 days. When Captain America throws his invincible shield and raises his invincible hammer, all evil forces surrender. Waste. This term became the mantra of Red Skull during this period. Recently, Hydra's bases have been taken over by Howling Commandos one by one. No matter how strict the protection is, it's useless. He sent many people to surround this army, but they all returned without success. Even one of the most heavily guarded important strongholds with a large number of defenders that is almost impossible to lose was hit by a 1-meter-thick lightning strike on the energy system on a rainy day, blowing up from the inside. We are about to launch an attack that shocks the world, but we are delayed again and again. Just because you can't deal with a fool holding a shield, and a guy who just hides behind and shoots coldly, he growled angrily at Dr. Zola. That's not what I'm good at. I can develop weapons, but I can't make them fire. Also, the guy who can only shoot cold guns is more difficult than Captain America. An officer came to report. I'm sorry, Mr. Schmidt, we have fought to the last man. That line added fuel to the fire, and Red Skull finished him off with a single shot. Obviously not. Then he turned his head and yelled at Dr. Zola. Get rid of them, or you will know the consequences. The repeated setbacks made him almost lose his patience. If Dr. Zola hadn't been really useful, he would have been sent to a concentration camp long ago. Dr. Zola's face was somber. He knew the Red Skull meant what it said. On this day, the Roaring Commando finally got information from Dr. Zola about a train passing through the snow-capped mountains. No one knows, this is a trap, and the tremendous pressure brought by Red Skull made Dr. Zola decide to fight it out. While Steve and Bucky were separated by the gate controlled by Dr. Zola, Thor was alone in a car surrounded by a group of heavily armored soldiers. They are clad in thick alloy armor, which is difficult to penetrate even the strongest armor-piercing bullets. Is it specifically aimed at my layout? Thor looked up at the monitor. Who told you that I can only shoot? Pulled out the pistol, bang bang bang, a few times, not at the armored soldiers, but at several cameras. On the other side, under the bombardment of energy weapons, Bucky raised his shield to block in front of Captain America, but unfortunately his physical fitness was not comparable to that of Captain America. He was blasted out of the carriage by a cannonball, and he firmly grasped the crumbling handrail outside the carriage. Enraged, Captain America smashed the enemy out of the car with a hammer, and crawled back out to reach Bucky. Bucky, grab my hand. Bucky reached out, but fell into the abyss before he could hold Captain America. Bucky. When Thor grabbed Dr. Zola and walked over, Captain America was squatting on the ground and gritting his teeth, trying to control his emotions. As in history, politicians won't let the talent of Dr. Zora go unnoticed, and that has nothing to do with Thor. Losing his little friend Winter Soldier, Captain America turned his grief and anger into strength, and after destroying multiple Hydra strongholds in succession, he finally found the Red Skull. Roaring Commando launched the final battle against Hydra. Hydra's side retreated steadily, and Red Skull took the Tesseract and rushed to a bomber with huge amounts of it. The target of the bombers was New York. Thor, Peggy and others held back the others, while Steve chased after Red Skull, rushed into the fighter plane, and launched the fateful duel. Red Skull was no match for Captain America. Steve, equipped with a hammer shield, defeated him in a few strokes. Desperate to turn the tables, Red Skull grabs the Tesseract. But his power is not enough to control the space gem. The power of Rubik's Cube explodes in an instant, and Red Skull disappears from Captain America's sight. Captain America quickly got into the pilot's seat, only to find that the plane's autopilot had locked on to New York. If you change to a flight crew with professional skills, there may be other solutions. And Steve doesn't have this skill, he can only choose to climb and land. Reported the situation to the headquarters, he connected the channel to Thor. The Hydra soldiers have been cleared, and Thor and Peggy are responsible for the follow-up. Have you decided? Maybe we should contact Howard, he will have a way, Thor said. Steve shook his head. There's no time. I have to land right away. If it takes too long, many people will die. This is my choice. Okay. Although he knew this scene a long time ago, Thor was still a little emotional at this time. Is there any unfulfilled wish? No. Unfortunately, I don't see the day when the war is won, and I don't get a chance to see Bucky again. He pushed down the landing lever. There will be a chance. Peggy is now on the sidelines, quietly watching the two say goodbye. Boom. The plane crashed into the ice, sank to the bottom of the water, and was covered in ice and snow. The signal disappears. Thor was silent for a moment, then stood up suddenly. Where are you going? Peggy Carter asked. Thor gave her a deep look, without answering, and climbed into a fighter jet. Peggy Carter's expression changed, she gritted her teeth suddenly, followed and sat in the passenger seat. The two remained silent the whole time. The northernmost part of Alaska is only a few hundred kilometers from where Captain America crashed. Thor watched the sea quietly, with Peggy Carter standing beside him. After a long time, she spoke. Don't you have anything to tell me? Or, have you been hiding it from me? The expression on Thor's face changed, he turned his head to look at Peggy and said, What do you see? Peggy looked serious. You have been hiding it. I have investigated, Donald Blake. This name has never appeared, as if it appeared out of thin air. You had a good relationship with Steve very early on, even on purpose. Judging from your performance, you are not particularly keen on helping others. Perhaps, you have known for a long time that he will become Captain America. Bucky fell off a cliff. You didn't act that sad because you knew. Sergeant Barnes was just missing, not dead. There are many more. For example, you know that Howard will have a son in the future, and you even know his character. You also know. Thor's face changed. These details are actually difficult for ordinary people to notice. She is indeed the strongest agent, or she has been paying attention to herself. Then have you guessed it? I couldn't guess it at first, and I wouldn't guess in that direction. However, one time when I was idle, I read a document introducing the theory of relativity, and then, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was possible. Does space-time travel really exist? Thor was silent for a moment, then replied, It exists. These words actually confirmed Peggy Carter's guess. Sure enough. Peggy Carter's eyes lit up. It's unbelievable. A person who has been with you for so long is actually from the future. Is this why you have been avoiding me? Thor nodded. I can't stay in this era forever. I came here to do something. When I finish it, I have to go back more than 60 years later. Therefore, I can't leave too much concern in this era. He's not a shy boy like Steve. How could he not feel Peggy Carter's thoughts? But he has been pretending to be confused, because the two will eventually part. Peggy's face was a little sad. Yes, more than 60 years, how hopeless. For many people, it is even a lifetime. In a blink of an eye, he stared into Thor's eyes and asked earnestly, What if I say, I can wait for you for 60 years? She leaned against Thor slowly. Thor hesitated, but did not stop. The war will be won, right? Well, it won't be long. Donald Blake is not your real name, is it? What is your real name? Thor Odinson. Sounds like some mythical figure. It's me. Do you believe it? Peggy stared at him for a while, then smiled. I believe, I heard a lot of incredible things today. I didn't expect that I would fall in love with a legendary god. Thor took out a syringe and used it on her. This is a strengthening potion in the future. Although it is not as effective as Super Soldier Serum, it is better in that it requires less and can make you recover faster after injury. Peggy Carter was about to speak when there was a sudden roar. Thor's face changed, he gently pushed Peggy away, and walked forward. With a thought, a dazzling light burst out from the army uniform on his body. Under Peggy Carter's shocking gaze, the pitch-black battle armor and the red cloak were instantly equipped on her body. Thor armor. The moment Red Skull activated the Tesseract before, a third side mission appeared before Thor's eyes. Drip. Congratulations to the host for discovering the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 3. Complete all the branches to complete the mission. Branch 1. Completed. Branch 2. Completed. Branch 3. Stop the supergiant from taking the Tesseract and kill it. At this moment, Thor finally understood the key to repairing the timeline. Whether it is the relationship line of Captain America or the future of Howard Stark, it is actually not a big change. Even if you want to fix it, you don't have to do it yourself. The ones that could really make an impact are Supergiant and Tesseract. Without Tesseract, Captain Marvel will not appear in the future, and the idea of Avengers will not exist. Human beings will have to delay contact with alien civilizations for more than 10 years. No wonder, there were only 4 Black Orders under Thanos. It turns out that Supergiant had died on Earth in the 1940s. A female figure walked up slowly, with a slender figure, but a face uglier than Ebony Maw. "Who are you?" Supergiant looked vigilant. Although this man was wearing an ancient battle armor, he brought her more pressure than any previous opponent. A strange wave of energy came. One split into 2, one floated towards Thor, and the other quietly floated towards Peggy Carter not far away. Gotcha. Dazzling lightning surrounded the surroundings, and Supergiant's energy was dissipated instantly. "Don't play your so-called mind control, you have no chance in front of me." Thor looked disdainful. In fact, he really doesn't think much of this Thanos scout. "I even ked your master Thanos, who are you?" Supergiant's face turned pale. She didn't expect the spiritual power of the person in front of her to be far superior to her. When she gritted her teeth, psychokinesis turned into a long spear and stabbed towards Thor. With a bang, mixed with a punch of lightning, it directly hit the tip of the spear, and the psychokinesis spear instantly shattered, and the rest of the momentum slapped on it endlessly. Ah! With a scream, Supergiant flew upside down more than 10 meters, and she looked at Thor in horror. With the Tesseract out of the way, staying alive is the most important thing now. She exhausted her strength again, released a mass of energy, shot straight at Peggy Carter, and fled in another direction. Thor quickly charged in front of Peggy Carter, punching the energy ball. Supergiant is not on the same level as herself, and the other Yao 4 generals are no match for her. She alone is delivering food. Pay attention to her mind control, and she can be beaten casually. She's going to run. Even though she believed what Thor said, the scene just now shocked her greatly. Seeing that Supergiant has climbed into a fighter plane that has never been seen to take off, he hastily shouted, "I can't run." Thor's eyes were fixed, and he pointed to the sky with one hand. A flash of lightning rushed into the sky, and the surrounding wind suddenly blew up. Peggy Carter had never seen before. The black clouds in the sky were so close to the ground like this moment, and the sound of thunder had never been so deafening, as if the whole sky was about to collapse. At the end of the sky, a dazzling bolt of lightning appeared across the sky, rushing towards the fighter plane where Supergiant was located with the power to destroy everything. Just rushing into the sky, Supergiant, who was still in shock, suddenly saw a bright light, and a random dazzling thunder rushed towards him. No! With a terrified cry, the fighter plane was bathed in lightning and instantly turned into ashes. Drip. Congratulations to the host for completing the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 3. Stop the Supergiant from taking Tesseract and kill it. Drip. Congratulations to the host for completing all the branches. The task, the Eternal Secret, is completed, and the reward, eternal life. Drip. The task of repairing the timeline is completed, and the host will return within 10 minutes. Please be prepared. Warning. The host cannot carry any living things to the future. Carrying them forcibly will lead to forcible deactivation. You're leaving, aren't you? Peggy Carter whispered, her eyes full of sadness. Thor nodded. There are still 10 minutes. The two sat side by side, watching the sun disappear on the horizon. At that time, I was still alive, right? Well, we will meet again. Also, there are a few things you have to remember. Thor suddenly looked back at her and explained. At least in this century, don't let other people know my true identity, not even Stark. I'm sure you won't tell others about this, just find any reason for my departure. Also, retire early. Now that Dr. Zola has been recruited, it is inevitable that S.H.I.E.L.D. will become Snake and S.H.I.E.L.D. in the future. As one of the founders, if he stays in S.H.I.E.L.D., he is likely to be attacked by Hydra. Howard Stark is an example. Peggy Carter nodded. Although she didn't know the specific reason, she believed what Thor said. You still owe me a dance, Paige said suddenly. After the war is over. Oh, I'm afraid it will be the next century. When can I see you? Wait until I take the initiative to ask you out. The inappropriate voice of the system reminded of. Hey, congratulations for triggering the Captain America-related mission. The Covenant of the Century, you will be rewarded for completing the mission. Mission objective. In the new century, invite Peggy Carter to dance. Mission reward, dancing proficiency. The warm time always passed quickly, and a green light surrounded Thor. Use the skill on the target. Peggy Carter, Immortality. Peggy Carter looked at the place where Thor disappeared in dismay, and finally couldn't help closing her eyes, with tears running down the corners of her eyes. For more than half a century, it is really hopeless. After a long time, she picked up the communicator. I found a tesseract clue, the northernmost part of Alaska, close to my current coordinates. Captain America crashed and disappeared. A large number of Hydra remnants tried to snatch tesseract but failed. Captain Black unfortunately fell into the sea during the battle and disappeared. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, the war is over. The colleagues of the Roaring Commando gave a toast to Steve and Blake, and they did not forget the former leader. Howard followed the clues to find tesseract. Even without the guidance of tesseract's energy, he still did not give up searching. But in the huge Arctic Ocean, looking for two people under the cover of icebergs is tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. Paige calmed down from her initial disorientation and seemed to accept reality. Colonel Phillips handed Thor's retirement files to her, and she looked at the photos in a daze. One night in 1991, Howard Stark drove home alone. He was in a bad mood and just wanted to find a place to be alone. Back then, that nasty Blake was shot with a crow's mouth. His son was even more of an asshole than himself back then, and his reputation as a playboy in his early 20s had surpassed his own back then. Just thinking about it, suddenly the car lost control and hit a tree. A metal arm dragged him out. Howard looked up, and suddenly exclaimed, "Sergeant Barnes." His response was a hard punch, and then another punch. Gradually he lost consciousness. Confirming the target's death, Bucky faked the scene of the crash and disappeared into the darkness. About half an hour later, the fingers of the corpse on the ground moved. After this incident, Howard has always felt that he has a memory disorder. Even if the person who sacrificed for half a century appears, it is impossible for him to be so young. But after this difficulty, Howard, who seemed to be reborn, finally decided to let go. He handed over the company to Tony and hid himself behind the scenes. In 2005, Kamar Taj Holy Place, Ancient One was casting a spell. Suddenly a magician rushed in and shouted, "Your Highness Sorcerer Supreme, Caecilius has betrayed." Ancient One was startled, and the spell in his hand fluctuated. Not good. Hurry up to make up for it, but the temporary difference finally caused an impact. Thor, who was supposed to return immediately, inevitably had a slight shift in return time and space. Looking at the dark world around him, Thor looked helpless. Ancient One, you half-witted magician, no wonder the dignified Earth Asgardian was stabbed to death with a knife. At the door of Betty Rose's apartment, Peggy Carter looked at the empty room in a daze. Who? Betty Rose looked at the person who came in, and felt familiar, but she didn't match her age. She asked cautiously, are you Carter's agent? I seem to have seen your photo in Shield's profile. Well, I'm. Peggy Carter nodded. Well, Senior Carter, where did you get my boyfriend? Peggy Carter can't help but hold her forehead. Thor, you bastard, dove on me as soon as you get back, and let me help you clean up this mess. After Peggy Carter comforted Betty, she found Maya Hansen through some information from S.H.I.E.L.D. and exchanged many things. Without knowing when Thor would return, Maya Hansen set up a small research center with her help. Although extremist research is stuck in a bottleneck, she also does some other research. Betty Ross finally accepted that her boyfriend left in an emergency to save the world and returned to the military laboratory. She, who was disturbed by Thor's affairs, and Bruce Banner, who was not very talkative, naturally couldn't spark. A few months later, an experimental accident, under the irradiation of gamma rays, Hulk was born. The newborn Hulk is almost irrational, and his only thought is to destroy everything in front of him. A green giant rushed out of the laboratory and disappeared into the night. The experimenters suffered heavy casualties, and a large amount of equipment was destroyed. Hulk, who was so emotional, didn't show mercy, and Betty Ross was seriously injured and paralyzed. Normally, with such an injury, he basically spends the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Fortunately, there is Extremis, although there is no pre-injection, it will take a while to recover, but it is enough. She decided to jump ship to Maya Hansen's laboratory after her injury was recovered. The terrible consequences of the military's crazy experiments frightened her. Out of guilt for his daughter, General Ross did not object. On the other side, he was furious and sent a large number of people to search for traces of Hulk everywhere. However, Banner, who has not transformed, is a very smart person. He cannot be found without transforming, and cannot be defeated after transforming. Therefore, the search for Hulk has not progressed for several years, as if the world has evaporated. Before coming to Earth, with Thor's approval, Maya Hansen sold a small amount of Extremis to General Ross at a high price as research funding. While the modified version of Extremis has a minimal strength boost, the physical recovery effect is still very practical. In fact, General Ross was also very interested in the first-generation virus, but the explosive side effects made him dare not risk the disgrace of the world. Time passed slowly, and soon it was 2010. On this day, a major event that shocked the entire United States happened. Tony Stark, a genius inventor and young domineering president, was kidnapped by terrorists while attending a weapons conference in Afghanistan. For a time, the entire United States was in an uproar. In his capacity and the influence of Stark Industries, this could change the whole world. No one would have thought that this kidnapping would lead to the opening of a new era. This annoying playboy, because of this incident, the turtle became a superhero. In the dark space, Thor is thinking about where this is and how to leave. Kamar Taj's magician, kidney deficiency at critical moments is indeed true. I don't know what's going on outside now. At this moment, a deep voice rang in the ear. Kneel down. What? As the saying goes, a man has gold under his knees, and at Thor's knees there is vibranium. I don't even kneel to Thanos. Who are you? Thor, who was already full of depression, said angrily, Get out, kneel your mother. The dark space suddenly fell silent. Thor suddenly reacted and looked in the direction of the sound. Old sister, why did you come out suddenly without saying hello? The face of the person in front of him was frosty, and it was she who spoke just now, Hela. Well, Hela's mother is also Frigga, so I really have to kneel to her mother. He. Hello? If I didn't see you fall into the broken space crack, I wouldn't be interested in fishing you out. Now, kneel before your queen. Outsiders definitely can't kneel, since they are from our own family, definitely can't kneel either. Thor definitely knew that once he got down on his knees, it was hard to stand up straight. Thor spread his hands. Sister, don't be like this. Our Asgard is already a society where everyone is equal, and that kind of thing is no longer popular. Hela sneered. She understood that this guy looked honest, but in fact he was much more cunning than Odin's old and immortal, and he got the point without paying attention when talking to him. From this point of view, he is actually an ideal heir to the throne. But you are the most suitable. She raised her hand, and a slender black long sword appeared in her hand. Slapping the younger brother while eating and sleeping has always been the traditional virtue of Asgard, so is Thor, and so is Hela. Since you can't speak well, then beat yourself to death. What's more, Hela believes in not pushing if you can do it. She brushed her long hair, black spikes protruding from the back of her collar, and the terrifying power of death was fluctuating. It seems that if you don't fight a game, you won't be able to pass the test today. Sure enough, lunatics are the most difficult to deal with. If there is a disagreement, they will do it. The point is, I still can't beat her now. The fighting time was not long, and Thor felt like he was about to be beaten into a dog in less than half an hour. In addition to being able to barely score 50-50 in physical skills, strength, magic, speed, and defense are almost suppressed in all directions, and they also have bloodlocks. It is estimated that this is because Hela did not use his full strength, and there is no Asgard home bonus. Here Thor gritted his teeth and struggled, thinking about a way to break the situation. On the other hand, Hela became more and more excited. At this moment, a golden halo suddenly appeared in front of Thor. Ancient One stepped out of it, waved the magic fan in his hand, and wound an energy whip towards Hela. Hela, who was originally indifferent, focused his eyes, and shot out several flying swords at the same time, cutting off the energy whip. Then, he saw a crystal-clear transparent wall pushing towards him. Before he could react, he was trapped in the mirror space with a sword and could not move. Big Brother 666. I fought so hard, but Ancient One was able to take down Hela with 2 moves. Although Hela didn't understand the opponent's skills, it also proved the strength of Ancient One. Who are you? Hela lost her composure in a rare way. The pressure that this seemingly fragile Midgardian brought her was no less than that of Odin, who was at his peak back then. Ancient One did not answer her question, but said indifferently, The family affairs of the Asgard royal family have nothing to do with me, but this person came here because of my negligence, so I can't turn a blind eye. After finishing speaking, she turned and walked into the portal. The restraints on Hela were released, and she gasped for breath. Thor walked up to Hela and said in a low voice, Asgardian of Midgard is the real #1 powerhouse in the 9 realms at this stage. Because of her, Midgard only belongs to the 9 realms in name. After speaking, follow Ancient One into the portal. Hela looked at the slowly shrinking aperture, with an uncertain expression on his face. For a moment, she almost wanted to rush out of this portal desperately. But when she thought that Odin would be summoned immediately after going out, and that powerful magician might block the door, she still suppressed the thought. Anyway, Odin doesn't have much time left, not a few years away. Hard-boiled Tony Stark was in a cave, banging away with a hammer when Thor left the seal through the portal. Originally, the group of desperados who kidnapped him wanted to tear up his ticket immediately. But the Jericho missile that Tony showed at the previous press conference was really useful, so the terrorists planned to squeeze out his last value. They sent materials and asked Tony Stark to make missiles for them. It's a pity that Tony is not a fool. I believe that after the terrorists got the missile, his conscience found out and let him go. What a joke. He didn't intend to make missiles in the first place. Under the threat of death, Tony Stark's already clever brain played super level, and began to build the first-generation steel battlesuit among a bunch of missile parts. It's a pity that the humanoid silhouette he created has nothing to do with the missile. Even if the terrorist is a pig, he can feel something is wrong. After a severe beating from the society, the terrorist leader issued an ultimatum. If the missiles cannot be completed tomorrow, they will be slammed. It's a pity. When did Tony Stark suffer this kind of grievance? If he did, would it still be him? His assistant, Ethan, no longer had any scruples and accelerated the building of the armor. If Stark had been given a few more minutes, perhaps he would have succeeded. However, the vigilant terrorist leader watched the surveillance from time to time, and rushed over immediately after finding something wrong. The bomb tied to the iron door killed 2 young men, but it will take some time for the armor to activate, and the terrorists have already reached the door. At the critical moment, Ethan picked up an AK and walked towards the door. No. Come back quickly and follow the plan. Ethan turned back and smiled at him, and said firmly, "This is my plan." Regardless of Stark's dissuasion, he resolutely charged it out. The gunshots rang out, then died down quickly. Stark's eyes watered, and he now knew what that meant. When the terrorists rushed into the cave where Stark was held, what appeared in front of them was a burly figure with black metallic luster. Tony Stark, the munitions boss and playboy, was finally awakened by the death of Dr. Ethan. Angry flames sprayed on the terrorists. Even the original Iron Man wasn't something a group of mortals could hold back. He rushed out of the cave, detonated the ammunition depot, fired the rocket ejection system before exploding, rushed through the flames, and then exhausted his energy in the air and fell headlong on the sand. A military helicopter flies overhead and spots a battered Stark. In any case, he escaped. On this day, arms dealer and playboy Tony Stark completed his metamorphosis and became a superhero. In the hall of Kamar Taj, Thor is haggling with Ancient One. He already knew that he had been displaced for nearly 5 years, which was too scary. If Ancient One's hand trembled, maybe when he came back, there would only be 3.5 billion people left on Earth. Well, it was indeed my mistake this time. May I ask what you need? As long as it doesn't violate the principle, Kamar Taj will try my best to satisfy you. Ancient One nodded with a wry smile. This is Thor's turn to be in trouble. Kamar Taj is different from Asgard. The perennial closure doesn't even have much money for incense. The poor are dying, and the Wi-Fi is all from a big country next door. The only thing that interests Thor is, for example, the thing that let me go back to the past. Or is there any red cloak that can fly around by itself? The forehead cloak is also fine. I have used this cloak for more than 1,000 years. It's time to change. Looking at this face that seemed to understand nothing, Ancient One resisted the urge to smash the guy's head, and said in a low voice, "The Eye of Agamotto is something that the Sorcerer Supreme swore to protect, and the levitation cloak belongs to the next Sorcerer Supreme." Is that so? Thor pretended to think for a while, and then his eyes lit up. Then Magician, you accept me as an apprentice and let me be the next Sorcerer Supreme. Can you give me both? Master, you lack apprentices, just say it. Ancient One felt that his image of being an outsider was about to lose its hold. How shameless. It's the cub of the Odin family. Eventually, the Ancient One gave Thor a sling ring that could be used to open the portal, and taught him how to use it. Although Asgard has Bifrost that can be used to teleport, Bifrost has a longer activation time and is more suitable for airborne large armies, while Sling Ring is more flexible in normal battles. In his previous life, Thor had seen Doctor Strange cooperate with the crowd to besiege Thanos. According to the method given to him by Ancient One, Thor learned how to use the Sling Ring in more than an hour. Ancient One and a group of magicians are amazing. This level is almost rare in Kamar Taj in 100 years. Unfortunately, they are from Asgard. Thor sighed a little. No wonder Ancient One tricked Doctor Strange. He learned it in 2 minutes in the cold environment of Mount Everest. No wonder it was called a legend of history. This magical ability is really terrifying. He immediately drew a circle and came to the headquarters of Snake and Shield, Nick Fury's office. I made Peggy Carter wait for 60 years, and it finally came to an end, but in the end I kept waiting for another 5 years. But I didn't know Peggy Carter's address, so I had to go find a marinated egg. However, since I just learned how to teleport, and the marinated egg office has only been opened once, so. Who are you? Put your hands up and put your head in your hands. A gun was quickly brought to his head, a clear female voice sounded, and a girl with blonde hair appeared in his eyes. In fact, with Thor's skill, even without divine power, he can subdue the opponent in an instant. However, the girl's somewhat familiar face made him stunned. He raised his hands cooperatively. After the girl saw Thor clearly, she also seemed puzzled. After thinking for a while, she tentatively asked very uncertainly, "Uncle Black?" Thor immediately understood her identity. Agent 13, Sharon Carter, Peggy Carter's niece. This uncle's call is really magical, inexplicably feel old. However, Thor felt much better when he thought that he had an elder nephew who had just escaped from the terrorists. Thor put down his hand, nodded and said, "Are you Peggy's niece? I often hear her talking about you." The gun that had just been put down was immediately raised again. "As far as I know, you and my aunt have not seen each other for 65 years. Do you think I look like a 65-year-old? Gritting her teeth. Sure enough, what Mama said was right, the more attractive a man is, the more deceitful he is. I have a go. Are all agents so sharp? It's almost impossible to set it up." Thor's figure flashed, and the gun was in his hand. Throwing it on the table casually. "Okay, take me to see your aunt quickly. If we delay our dancing, don't blame me if your aunt teaches you." Sharon Carter was still in awe of Peggy, and even though she was a little depressed when Thor moved her out, she honestly led the way. "By the way, how did you know me?" Thor was a little puzzled. He had disappeared for decades, and there were not many acquaintances back then. A few people recognized Thor's name, but Sharon Carter's name was Black. "My aunt has collected several old photos, and I often take them out to look at them alone," Sharon said, suddenly seemed to find something interesting, and said with a bright smile, "I just found out recently that you still have a name. Your name is Thor, isn't that your original name? My aunt has a lot of opinions on you because of the pigeons you released 5 years ago, so you can ask for more blessings. Then let the storm be more violent." At the door of an apartment, Sharon Carter knocked on the door, and Thor and Peggy Carter who came out met their eyes. Sharon Carter gave a self-seeking look, and ran into the guest room alone, leaving the two alone. There was no violent storm as imagined. Peggy Carter pursed her lips and tried hard to control her tears, but she couldn't. For Thor, it was just a few days, but for her, it was half a century. Thor originally prepared a lot of rhetoric, but only one sentence remained. "Peggy, I'm back." Peggy took out a tissue to wipe away her tears, and tried to smile. "Is this the only sentence that made me wait for so long?" Thor came to his senses. He gathered himself together, gently put a hand together, and said, "Beautiful Miss Page, may I ask you to dance?" Sharon Carter in the guest room shivered and got goosebumps. Drip. "Congratulations for completing the task, the covenant of the century, and get the reward, dance proficiency." The system sound reminded Thor, but Thor ignored it. Many times, the purpose of completing a quest is for the quest originally rather than for the reward. If it is a task that goes against his heart, no matter how rich the reward is, he will not choose it. Peggy blushed, not out of embarrassment, and Thor was too embarrassed. But she still didn't tear down the stage, and gave a low hum. Thor hugged her and said softly, "It's all over, I won't leave again." In the next few years, the world will undergo major changes and truly enter the superhero era. "For so many years, my appearance has not changed. You did it, right?" Peggy asked suddenly. "Yes. For mortals, birth, old age, sickness and death are the laws of nature. Longevity is not a good thing. It often means endless loneliness after the partner leaves. But I am an Asgard, and my lifespan is far beyond ordinary people, so I will not let such a thing happen in on us." "Then why didn't you tell me earlier? For a long time, I thought how desperate I would be when I faced you with dementia in my 40s. Peggy smiled lightly. Thor coughed lightly. "Didn't I want to surprise you?" In fact, when he finally completed the mission of eternal life, he only made up his mind on the spur of the moment. Previously, the plan he considered was to wait until he returned to modern times, and try to borrow the time gem from Ancient One to restore Peggy's youth, even if he used Strange as a threat. Thor never minded being a villain for the sake of those around him. Peggy Carter briefly told Thor some things over the years. After the war was won, Peggy Carter, Howard Stark, and Colonel Phillips founded S.H.I.E.L.D. later. Although her appearance remained unchanged, Peggy, who kept Thor's advice in mind, still chose to retire when she reached the age. And Howard has been paying attention to S.H.I.E.L.D. until he was assassinated by Hydra in 1991. He let Stark Industries announce his death. In fact, he has been tracing the truth behind the scenes. Unfortunately, until his death a few years ago, there has been no progress. The two got into the car side by side and drove towards a nearby high-end dance hall. Sharon Carter came out of the bedroom and said with a sigh, "The rustic love story from half a century ago can actually make my aunt, who is so emotional, what a ghost." It turns out that Thor, who was listed as a secret more than 10 years ago, was Lieutenant Colonel Black back then. I'm afraid director Nick is still keeping it in the dark. Forget it. This matter is out of my control.